Raymond Burr was famous for playing men who stood for truth, justice, and moral authority. But behind the calm voice and commanding presence was a life built on one carefully maintained lie after another. For years, Burr told the world his wife had died in a tragic accident and that his son had been taken by cancer. Stories so devastating they discouraged further questions. The reality was far more dangerous. In an era when the wrong truth could instantly end a career, Burr invented a family, invented loss, and invented grief to protect a secret Hollywood would never have forgiven. This isn't a story about deception for fame. It's about survival in an industry that forced one of its biggest stars to choose lies over obliteration. William Raymond Stacey Burr was born on May 21, 1917, in the quiet town of New Westminster, British Columbia. His father sold hardware, his mother taught piano, and nothing about his childhood hinted at legend. Just an ordinary family, living an ordinary story. Even Burr later joked that it sounded almost too plain to be true. But that calm, uneventful beginning didn't last long. According to Burr, by the age of 12, he had already left school and gone searching for work. A claim that feels unbelievable until you remember the shadow of the Great Depression. With a single mother raising 3 children, survival mattered more than dreams. Burr said he traveled as far as New Mexico and worked as a ranch hand, often mistaken for an adult because he was unusually large for his age. By 1937, Burr found his way to the Pasadena Playhouse, opening doors to Broadway and radio. Self-conscious about his size, he weighed 12 pounds at birth, he turned to radio, where his commanding voice, not his appearance, defined him. There, he finally played romantic leads, unheard of for him on stage. It was a safe path, until fate offered him something far bigger. By the mid-1940s, Hollywood was slipping into shadow. Film noir was taking shape, filled with moral rot, dim alleyways, and men who looked dangerous before they ever spoke. The studios already had enough handsome heroes. What they needed were bruisers, men who could loom, threaten, and absorb punishment. For Raymond Burr, this was the cruel twist of fate that finally opened doors. His size, long treated as a burden, suddenly became an asset. In noir, being big meant being feared, and for a while it felt like striking gold. But success came with a quiet cost. Years later, Burr would bitterly describe himself as the fat hero of film noir. Though still in his 20s, he was cast as a man far older than he was. Sometimes, disturbingly, he even played the father of actors younger than himself. Burr believed he knew why. His weight. In his mind, it sentenced him to villainy, and villains never got the girl. They didn't walk into the sunset. They were doomed to fall, forgotten at the end of the reel. Burr felt trapped in a role Hollywood refused to let him escape, and the rut only deepened. Then came a strange detour. In 1954, Burr appeared opposite Anne Bancroft in Gorilla at Large, a 3D oddity later remembered as unintentionally hilarious. He still didn't get the girl, but he did get the gorilla. For Burr, though, it was something new, a taste of being the lead. And once he had that taste, he wanted more. That same year, another unlikely opportunity arrived, one born half a world away. Japan was transfixed by a towering radioactive monster named Godzilla. American distributor Edmund Goldman believed the film could succeed in the U.S., but audiences weren't eager for foreign movies. His solution was bold and bizarre. Rebrand the film as Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and insert an American star into footage that was already finished. The actor he chose was Raymond Burr. The process was frantic. Sets were rebuilt in America. Asian American actors were hired as doubles, and Burr was dropped into a film that already existed. Over time, Burr spun dramatic tales about the shoot, claiming he worked non-stop for 24 straight hours, later revising it to 6 grueling days. The truth was murkier, but the pressure was real. Many in Hollywood scoffed. Why would a respected noir actor lower himself to a creature feature? Surely it was just for the paycheck. Yet the real surprise came later. Burr actually loved the experience. He enjoyed the work and took pride in it. Long after the critics moved on, he spoke warmly of those old Godzilla films. For a man so often boxed in by his appearance, maybe that towering monster felt strangely familiar and strangely freeing. Perhaps Hollywood sensed that Raymond Burr was finally becoming the man he had always struggled to be, because everything in his life was about to shift. Years before he faced Godzilla, Burr had quietly impressed audiences in a supporting role as a district attorney in A Place in the Sun, sharing the screen with rising icons Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor. That performance lingered in the industry's memory. Nearly 5 years later, it caught the attention of a producer preparing to bring Earl Stanley Gardner's courtroom novels to television. Burr was invited to audition, but not for the lead. The role on offer was a supporting part, something that might have seemed like a step backward for an established film actor. Still, he showed up, and that single audition changed everything. Producer Gail Patrick Jackson immediately saw what others had missed. Burr wasn't wrong for the district attorney. He was the attorney. Perry Mason himself. There was only one condition before the role could be his, and it cut deep. Burr was asked to lose weight. For a man who had blamed his body for a lifetime of lost opportunities, this was both cruel and hopeful. He agreed without hesitation, subjecting himself to a punishing crash diet. When he returned for a final screen test, slimmer and exhausted, the transformation was undeniable. When Gardner himself watched the footage, he reportedly rose and declared that Burr was Perry Mason. In that moment, Burr's career and identity were rewritten. When Perry Mason premiered in 1957, no one predicted its scale. The show ran for 9 seasons, drawing nearly 30 million viewers every Saturday night. Burr, once overlooked, was suddenly adored. Fan mail poured in, thousands of letters every week. After years in the shadows, America had finally embraced him. But fame brings curiosity, and curiosity brings pressure. Fans wanted to know everything, especially about Burr's private life. He spoke openly of a brief marriage years earlier to actress Isabella Ward, describing their modest life and quiet separation. The details were largely true. The trouble was, Burr didn't stop there. For reasons only he understood, he began adding layers to the story, creating a second wife. And with it, the fragile illusion of a life he felt the world expected him to have. The woman Burr spoke of was named Annette Sutherland, or so he claimed. In his telling, she had died in a tragic plane crash, and he even anchored the story to real history, insisting it was the same disaster that killed film star Leslie Howard. That detail was his undoing. Passenger lists were public, and Annette Sutherland wasn't on that flight. Still, Burr didn't stop there. He added a son to the story, saying the child was born from that marriage. When reporters asked to meet the boy, Burr panicked and reached for an even darker lie. His son, he said, had died of leukemia at just 10 years old. To the public, Raymond Burr became more than a beloved television star. He was painted as a grieving widower, a man marked by loss. But none of it was real, and the more he talked, the more suspicious people became. Just as curiosity began to fade, Burr did something astonishing. He invented yet another wife, Laura Andrina Morgan. And once again, she conveniently died of cancer, leaving him tragically alone. The pattern was undeniable. Burr couldn't stop fabricating sorrow. The cruel irony was that the truth frightened him far more than the lies. During the exhausting years of Perry Mason, Burr worked relentlessly. One quiet moment backstage, a knock came at his dressing room door. Standing there was Robert Benavides, a young, handsome actor delivering a script. Burr hired him as an assistant, and before long, their closeness was impossible to miss. To those paying attention, the truth became clear. Raymond Burr was gay. In an era that offered no safety for honesty, the fake wives and imaginary children were a shield, a desperate smokescreen to keep reporters at bay. Even after finding someone he loved, Burr couldn't risk openness. Instead, he offered another explanation. He was simply too busy for marriage. It sounded plausible, though it rang hollow when other stars managed relationships alongside equally demanding careers. Burr was willing to say anything, as long as it protected the secret he feared would destroy everything. He never remarried after his brief first marriage. And when Perry Mason finally ended, the question lingered quietly in the background. Now that the show was over, would Raymond Burr finally allow himself the life he'd always hidden? When Perry Mason ended in 1966, Raymond Burr didn't suddenly search for the life he'd always been asked about. Instead, he buried himself deeper in work. Just a year later, he returned to television as the lead in Ironside, a bold new series that ran for nearly a decade. Once again, Burr had the perfect explanation for his solitude. He was simply too busy. By now, he was no longer just a star. He was an institution, respected across both film and television. Then came an unexpected offer, one that seemed to reach back through time. Nearly 30 years after his first encounter with the giant lizard, Burr was asked to reprise his role in a new American cut of Godzilla in 1985. Many assumed he accepted the paycheck. Once again, they were wrong. Burr genuinely enjoyed returning to the creature feature that had once surprised audiences. And him. Though his character's name had to be simplified thanks to another famous Steve Martin, Burr's presence delighted longtime fans and earned him a new generation of admirers. Even after Ironside ended, Burr stayed busy, moving from one television project to the next. Most were short-lived, but they conveniently reinforced the image of a man too occupied for marriage. In 1985, he returned to the role that had defined him, starring in a series of Perry Mason television movies that became major hits. Once more, being Perry Mason explained everything, or so the public thought. The truth was quieter and far more tender. Raymond Burr was never alone. The young man who once knocked on his dressing room door in the 1960s, Robert Benavides, never left his side. Through the final years of Perry Mason, throughout Ironside, and across every later project, Burr and Benavides built a life together. Friends and colleagues knew him as Burr's constant companion, a presence so natural it rarely raised questions. In a world that offered no room for honesty, they hid in plain sight. Their love endured not in headlines or interviews, but in shared routines and private loyalty. And for the rest of Raymond Burr's life, Robert Benavides was there. Proof that behind decades of careful silence, Burr had found the one thing he'd always been denied: a lasting, quiet love. For decades, Raymond Burr shared his life with Robert Benavides on a secluded estate in Sonoma County, California, far from Hollywood's watchful eyes. To anyone who asked, Burr carefully described Benavides as his close friend and business partner, both statements true, yet deliberately incomplete. To further quiet suspicion, the two even launched a winery together in the 1980s, presenting themselves as collaborators bound by work rather than love. It was a performance Burr had perfected over a lifetime. Any hope that Burr might one day live openly was, sadly, never realistic. Hollywood had never been kind to gay actors, and during the 1960s and 70s, honesty often meant the end of a career. The industry even had a phrase for it: career suicide. Burr had fought too hard to be taken seriously, especially as a television leading man, to risk everything he'd built. So he chose survival over truth, fame over freedom, and kept the most important part of himself hidden from the public he served so faithfully. That lifelong silence followed him into his final years. In 1993, while filming yet another Perry Mason television movie, Burr became gravely ill. Doctors soon revealed the devastating diagnosis: renal cell carcinoma that had spread to his liver. The cancer was advanced and inoperable. There would be no miracle ending this time. Aware that his time was short, Burr faced the end with quiet dignity. He invited friends to his home, hosted small farewell gatherings, and said his goodbyes personally, on his own terms. On September 12, 1993, Raymond Burr passed away. After his death, the truth he had guarded for so long finally emerged without words. Burr's will left his entire estate, estimated at more than $30 million, to Robert Benavides, cutting out his biological family entirely. Some relatives attempted to challenge the decision, but they failed. In the end, Burr made the clearest statement of his life. Benavides was his family. His commitment, denied in public for decades, was undeniable in death. By then, Burr's professional legacy was unshakable. He had won multiple Emmy Awards, received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and earned lasting recognition in Canada, including a commemorative stamp and a place on Canada's Walk of Fame. TV Guide named him one of the greatest television performers of all time. Yet behind the accolades and courtroom victories lived a quieter story. A man who brought justice and certainty to millions of viewers, while spending his own life navigating fear, restraint, and a love he could never fully claim in the light.